October 8, 2025, Envigado, Colombia. U.S. naval intelligence has zeroed in on a threat that could spread across the region. A rusty garage sits on a forgotten industrial site flanked by unmarked trucks. Behind that unassuming door, 5 underground reactors hum day and night, refining cocaine and methamphetamine in quantities large enough to plunge an entire nation into crisis. A quiet, ruthless trade is underway between cartels in Colombia and Venezuela, a shipment destined for the crowded streets of the United States. For 3 months, the FBI and Colombian National Police have been tracking the trail. Shell companies, ghost trucks, encrypted money transfers. Every clue points to this moment. Today, an operation is launched to stop this threat once and for all. Can the U.S. military dismantle this criminal organization before it's too late? Or will Tren de Aragua make a deal and pump money into the market? I'll tell you the truth. At 2:05 a.m., October 8, 2025, in the industrial outskirts of Envigado, Colombia, the night was silent, too silent. A single light flickered above a grimy auto garage, its steel door rattling in the warm wind. To any passerby, it looked like a workshop for trucks. But inside, the FBI and Colombia's Policía Nacional were watching something far darker unfold. For months, their intercepted satellite calls traced the impossible. A garage that was secretly producing one of the purest narcotics ever measured, 99.3% methamphetamine purity. Hidden behind tool benches and oil drums, the garage was in fact a multi-million-dollar drug plant. Underneath the concrete floor lay 5 stainless steel reactors, each taller than a man, each capable of refining 2,000 pounds of crystal meth every week. Together, that was nearly 10,000 pounds a month, enough to flood entire American cities for a year. At street value, the output reached a staggering $1.6 billion annually. The operation was run by the Clan del Golfo, Colombia's most violent cartel, whose empire stretched from Medellin to the Venezuelan coast. Investigators uncovered barrels of methylamine, ventilation ducts disguised as car exhaust pipes, and a hidden tunnel leading to a nearby riverbank, an escape route for shipments bound for Venezuela. Even the electricity meters were hacked to conceal the energy drain of a chemical reactor farm. Every small detail screamed industrial precision, not chaos. This was no garage. It was a war machine disguised as a workshop, built to manufacture addiction by the ton. And as the clock struck 2:15 a.m., the agents watching from the ridge knew, if they didn't strike soon, another 2.3 tons of pure poison would vanish toward the Caribbean by dawn. The discovery in Envigado was only the opening note. Over the next 48 hours, October 8th to October 10th, 2025, a scramble of analysis, phone taps and satellite imagery pulled the rest of the map into focus. FBI analysts worked side by side with Policía Nacional cyber teams, tracing payment trails, GPS pings, and encrypted chat logs. Every breadcrumb pointed the same way. This was not local crime. It was an export machine. Forensic accountants followed wire transfers into shell companies in Panama and Curacao. Phone records showed rendezvous coordinates. GPS telemetry placed a convoy leaving Envigado at 2:30 a.m., October 9th, heading east. CCTV from small ports recorded the same white box trucks turning up at an isolated landing on the Gulf of Paria 2 nights later. Intelligence analysts estimated the loading plan: 1 maritime shipment every 3 weeks, each carrying approximately 4,000 pounds, approximately 1,814 kilograms, of finished product sealed in industrial crates. The implications were brutal. One such shipment, if it reached distribution networks intact, would translate to tens of millions of individual doses on U.S. streets. Intelligence conservatively valued a single sea load at up to $200 million in retail value. Worst-case models pushed annual throughput above 20,000 pounds, approximately 9,072 kilograms. A multi-$100 million pipeline running month after month. Worse still, the route was organized with military precision. Night transits, decoy manifests, and a chain of local handlers waiting on Venezuelan shores, links to a branch of Tren de Aragua. U.S. Navy maritime surveillance confirmed 2 vessels on parallel courses off the Venezuelan coast, loitering on predictable windows when small boats could come alongside undetected. By early October 10th, there was no longer any doubt. What began as a garage in Envigado was a single node in a continental conveyor belt, a factory on land and a highway across the sea. The question shifted from discovery to disruption. How to cut the line before the first 4,000-pound shipment vanished into the night? Would the Americans move fast enough, or watch a billion-dollar empire expand unchecked? At 1:30 a.m. on October 11, 2025, the Envigado industrial area was foggy and silent. Only the hum of the generators betrayed life inside the gang garage. Then a whisper on the radio rang out. Go, go, go. In less than 5 seconds, darkness erupted. 3 coordinated units, the FBI Hostage Rescue Team, the Colombian Police Special Operations Group, and U.S. Navy observers stationed offshore with SEALs, launched the attack with pinpoint precision. 52 armed agents converged on 3 sides. At 1:31 a.m., a shaped charge tore through the steel door like paper, and the first breaching team burst in. The silence was broken by 47 seconds of automatic gunfire. Inside, chaos and chemical fires intertwined. The air was thick with the smell of ammonia and gunpowder. 15 cartel gunmen, some armed with AK-103s and Uzis, fired wildly from behind steel drums and chemical tanks through the smoke. A stray bullet punctured the reactor's steam line, a one-time hit. The explosion sent molten debris flying across the lab, incinerating shelves of precursor chemicals. A wall thermometer shattered as temperatures soared to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, 649 degrees Celsius. But the agents held their ground. Through the flames, they advanced in tight formation, chanting slogans over the din. One SEAL was hit by shrapnel and wounded in the arm, but refused to evacuate, covering his team as they made their way to the basement. The battle lasted only 7 minutes, but in that time, the agents fired more than 1,400 rounds. When the gunfire stopped, silence fell. Then came a shocking revelation. Behind a false wall, a cold concrete vault. Inside, 6,000 pounds of pure crystal meth stacked like glass bricks, wrapped in plastic labeled auto filter. Its U.S. street value exceeds $480 million, enough for nearly 30 million doses, a figure roughly equivalent to the population of Texas. Nearby, 5 men were found shackled, their skin burned from chemical exposure, forced to work to keep production going. As the last gunman fell and the smoke cleared, the scale became clear. The garage wasn't a lab, it was a battlefield disguised as a factory, capable of producing more than 120,000 pounds a year, a billion-dollar pipeline of poison hidden in plain sight. As dawn broke over Envigado, the code name of the operation echoed over the intercom. Site secured. The heart of the machine destroyed. They thought the battle was over inside that factory, but they were wrong. What happened next turned the Caribbean into a war zone. Don't look away. The truth is about to be revealed. At 3:02 a.m. on October 11, 2025, the battle that began in Envigado turned east, toward the Caribbean. The garage was burning behind them, but the FBI's encrypted transmissions revealed something worse. 2 ships were already offshore. Data recovered from seized phones showed coordinates in the Gulf of Paria, 35 nautical miles off the Venezuelan coast, where a deal was about to take place. On those ships, the last remaining link in the drug pipeline, floated more than 4,000 pounds of pure methamphetamine, packed in steel barrels, and about $80 million was to be traded. The U.S. Navy and Colombian Coast Guard had been monitoring the operation for hours. Off the coast of Venezuela, the USS Wichita, a littoral combat ship, and a Poseidon P-8A patrol aircraft tracked the gang's vessels using infrared. One was a rusted freighter called the San Miguel, escorted by 2 smaller speedboats carrying Tren de Aragua gunmen. Naval radar confirmed there were 12 armed men on board, with machine guns mounted on the bow. They were ready to fight for their billions of dollars. The gang had relied on the fog and darkness as cover. Instead, it became their trap. At 3:19 a.m., the seas were rough. A Navy MH-60R Seahawk helicopter flew low, its searchlight piercing the black waves. U.S. Navy close! The gang's response was a hail of bullets, tracer bullets tracing red arcs across the water. The Seahawk listed sharply as its .50 caliber GAU-21 barreled forward. One of the gunboats caught fire, shells exploding in a storm of fire. Below, two RHIB teams raced ahead at 45 knots, skimming the waves. The first team boarded the San Miguel under cover of gunfire. Grenades rolled across the deck, flashlight, smoke, screams. Within 8 minutes, the gang fighters were subdued. Inside the cargo hold, sailors found steel drums containing 2,100 pounds of highly refined methamphetamine, along with another 1,900 pounds in nearby floating tanks, cargo the crew had attempted to dump overboard to destroy the evidence. By 3:47 a.m., it was all over. The cargo ship burned silently on the horizon as dawn began to break. 17 cartel members were arrested, and more than $350 million in drugs were recovered from the sea. A secret raid in Colombia turned into a full-scale naval confrontation, one that proved one thing: even in the middle of the ocean, there is nowhere to hide. By October 12, 2025, the fires had cooled, but the shockwaves were only beginning. The Envigado factory lay in ruins, the San Miguel freighter smoldered beneath the Caribbean dawn, and the operation's survivors sat in handcuffs aboard the USS Wichita. For the FBI and Colombian authorities, this was not just a victory, it was a revelation. Inside waterproof drives seized from the ship's control room were over 2.4 terabytes of encrypted data. When decrypted at the Bureau's Miami field office, the files exposed a global network, 51 offshore accounts, 7 shell corporations, and transfers exceeding $93 million routed through banks in Panama, Curacao, and Hong Kong. The intelligence linked the Clan del Golfo and Tren de Aragua not merely as partners, but as co-founders of a new transnational syndicate designed to supply 20,000 pounds of narcotics per quarter, enough to flood the U.S. with over 100 million doses every 3 months. The numbers defied belief. 1 terabyte of seized data equaled the production records of an entire industrial sector. Investigators confirmed that the captured factory was only one of 4 identical facilities across Colombia and Venezuela, each capable of producing $400 million worth of drugs monthly. Had they not been stopped, this alliance could have generated nearly $5 billion annually, rivaling the GDP of small nations. But amid the figures and forensic charts, the human stories struck hardest. The 5 rescued workers, victims of forced labor, told agents they were trafficked across borders, paid less than $15 a week to handle lethal chemicals without protection. One man's hands had been burned down to the bone from handling meth oil. Their testimonies turned evidence into outrage. By October 15th, joint U.S.-Colombian forces launched follow-up raids, freezing more than 70 bank accounts and seizing 9 vessels linked to the smuggling corridor. The president of Colombia called the operation a turning point against chemical warfare disguised as commerce. For the United States, the message was clear and cold. The war on drugs had entered a new phase. Cartels were no longer street gangs. They were industrial syndicates with fleets, budgets, and laboratories. And as the waves rolled quietly across the Caribbean, the wreck of San Miguel stood as a warning. The ocean remembers. And this time, America had answered back. As dawn rose over the Caribbean, smoke still curled from the charred wreckage of San Miguel. The sea, calm once again, carried the faint shimmer of oil and ash, traces of a battle that ended one empire and exposed another. For the FBI, the Colombian Policía Nacional, and the U.S. Navy, Operation Silent Harbor would be remembered not just for the tons of narcotics destroyed, but for the truth it revealed. The drug war had evolved into an industrial, multinational conflict fought across borders, screens, and oceans. In less than a week, the task force had dismantled a billion-dollar syndicate, seized over 10,000 pounds of high-purity meth, rescued human captives, and uncovered a financial network spanning 3 continents. Yet behind those statistics lay something deeper, a warning. The enemy no longer wore gang tattoos or hid in jungles. They operated in boardrooms, disguised as logistics companies, with accountants instead of gunmen. Their laboratories were cleaner than hospitals. Their profits larger than oil exports. America's fight against this new cartel order would not be measured in arrests or seizures alone, but in vigilance. In the courage to act before the next shipment left port, before the next garage became a factory. The Clan del Golfo and Tren de Aragua believed the ocean would protect them. Instead, it became their grave. For the sailors, agents, and officers who risked everything, victory was not triumph. It was duty fulfilled. The kind of duty that costs sleep, that leaves scars, but saves lives thousands of miles away. And as the sun climbed higher over the Caribbean horizon, one truth lingered above the smoke and silence. The ocean remembers who it swallows, and who it spares. If you believe America must never close its eyes to threats that rise from the sea, then stand with us. Like, share, and keep this story alive. Because only vigilance keeps the waves from turning black again. If you believe these stories matter, if you believe the world must see both the horror and the hope, then join us. Subscribe to this channel, share these truths, and help shine a light into the darkest corners. Together we ensure that silence is never the last word, and that justice always has the final say.